Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights and drift far, far away from your comfy duvet. We're going to journey back to a time when the wind whipped across endless grasslands, and the only sound was the thundering hooves of horses carrying messages across an empire. Imagine standing on the vast, treeless plains of Mongolia, the air crisp and biting. With only a thin felt yurt for shelter against the howling gales, you can feel the dust in your teeth, the chill seeping into your bones, and the immense, overwhelming sense of isolation. This isn't your average Amazon Prime delivery, is it? You're not just waiting for a package. You're part of the system, a tiny cog in an impossibly grand machine that dictates the flow of information across a nascent world. You probably won't survive this kind of delivery service. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling chatty, let me know your location and local time in the comments. It's always wild to see where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the heart of the Eurasian steppe, a place where horizons stretch into infinity and the sky feels impossibly vast. It's a land that breathes a rugged, untamed spirit, a place where survival hinges on an intimate understanding of the environment and a fierce self-reliance. This isn't a landscape for the faint of heart. It's a place where you learn to appreciate the warmth of a fire and the simple luxury of a solid roof over your head. The sun, when it's out, is relentless, beating down on the vast expanses, and when it dips below the horizon, the temperature plummets, leaving you shivering beneath a sky studded with more stars than you've ever imagined. This stark environment, however, wasn't just a challenge. It was a canvas upon which one of history's most impressive logistical systems would be painted. Think of it: no paved roads, no GPS, not even a reliable map in the modern sense. Just raw, untamed land and the sheer will of a people determined to conquer it, not just militarily, but also in the realm of communication. The Mongol Empire, at its zenith, sprawled across a mind-boggling expanse, stretching from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean. Try to wrap your head around that. You're talking about an area larger than any empire before or since, a truly colossal undertaking. And how do you govern such an immense territory, maintain control, and coordinate military campaigns across thousands of miles? You certainly can't just send a carrier pigeon and hope for the best. That's where the humble yurt, a surprisingly sophisticated dwelling, steps into the spotlight. Historians still argue whether the Yem system, as it came to be known, was a primary driver of imperial expansion or a necessary evolution once the empire had already grown to an unmanageable size. But one thing is for certain: without an effective way to communicate across such vast distances, the Mongol Empire would have fractured and crumbled long before it reached its impressive peak. It's a fundamental truth of any large organization, be it a multinational corporation or an ancient empire: information flow is king. Imagine you're a messenger, a simple rider, tasked with carrying vital dispatches. You're not just going to the next village. You're covering distances that would make modern truck drivers wince. The harshness of the steppe meant that every journey was a gamble, a test of endurance against the elements. You contend with sudden blizzards, scorching droughts, and the ever-present threat of bandits or rival tribes. Your life depends on the speed and efficiency of the system, and that system, at its core, relied on a network of strategically placed way stations, often centered around those distinctive, round felt tents we call yurts. These weren't just random stopping points. They were the logistical anchors of an empire. Think of them as the FedEx hubs of the 13th century, but with a much higher chance of frostbite. A quirky tidbit: some scholars suggest that the layout of these stations, with their precise distances and consistent provisions, may have even influenced later European postal systems, though direct evidence is scant. It's a fascinating thought, though, isn't it, how a simple nomadic dwelling became the blueprint for global communication. You trudge onwards, the landscape a relentless repetition of grass and sky. The wind whispers tales of nomads and conquests, a constant reminder of the epic scale of the Mongol undertaking. You're not just traveling. You're a vital artery in the flow of information, a human data packet in a pre-digital age. The Yem system, the network that makes this all possible, is the brainchild of Genghis Khan, a name that echoes through history like a thunderclap. This wasn't some haphazard arrangement. It was a meticulously planned, centrally controlled system designed to facilitate rapid communication, across his sprawling empire. Think of him not just as a conqueror, but as a visionary logistics manager. He understood that controlling territory meant controlling information, and that meant moving messages faster than anyone else could. The Yam, in its simplest form, was a series of relay stations strategically positioned along major roads. These weren't just places to grab a quick snack, they were fully stocked mini-bases, complete with fresh horses, food, and lodging for the wary messengers. You arrive at a station, exhausted, your muscles screaming, and you're greeted with the promise of rest and replenishment. It's a welcome respite in a world where comfort is a rare commodity. The system operated on a relay principle, much like a modern-day express delivery service. A messenger would ride at breakneck speed to the next station, swap his tired mount for a fresh one, and then continue on his way. This allowed messages to travel astonishing distances in incredibly short periods. We're talking about covering hundreds of kilometers a day, a feat that would have been unthinkable in most other parts of the world at that time. A mainstream historical fact, the Yam system is often credited with significantly contributing to the Mongols' military successes, allowing them to coordinate attacks and move troops with unprecedented speed. Imagine the riders themselves, these unsung heroes of the Mongol Empire. They were a special breed, selected for their endurance, horsemanship, and unwavering dedication. You are one of them. You're not just a delivery person. You are a vital link in the chain of command, entrusted with carrying messages that could determine the fate of battles, the lives of people, and the course of history. The Secret History of the Mongols, a primary source on the era, describes these riders as being given special privileges and protection, a testament to their importance. They were the VPs of their time, zipping across the steppe while everyone else was stuck in the mud. A quirky or fringe tidbit, some accounts suggest that these riders were given special clothing and markings to distinguish them, almost like a 13th century uniform, ensuring they were given priority at each station. You're practically a medieval superhero, minus the cape and tights. The horses, of course, were just as crucial to the system's success. The hardy Mongol horse, small but incredibly resilient, was perfectly suited to the harsh conditions of the steppe. You rely on your trusty steed. It's not just a means of transportation, it's your partner, your lifeline in this vast and unforgiving land. These weren't pampered show ponies. They were tough, wary animals capable of covering immense distances with minimal rest. The Yam stations maintained a large pool of these horses, ensuring that fresh mounts were always available. It's estimated that some stations had hundreds of horses on hand, a logistical feat in itself. Historians still argue whether the sheer number of horses required by the Yam system placed a significant strain on the steppe's resources, potentially contributing to environmental degradation in some areas. But whatever the environmental impact, the system's efficiency was undeniable. You arrive, a blur of motion, at a Yam station, the distinctive silhouette of yurts rising against the vast horizon. These aren't just tents. They're highly functional, mobile command centers, the very heart of the Mongol logistical genius. A yurt, with its round shape and collapsible frame, might seem primitive to your modern eyes, but it was ingeniously designed for the nomadic lifestyle and the harsh steppe environment. Imagine trying to set up a permanent brick building in the middle of nowhere, only to have to abandon it a few months later as the herds move on. Not exactly efficient, right? The yurt, however, could be dismantled, packed onto a few carts, and reassembled in a matter of hours. This mobility meant that the Yam system wasn't static. It could adapt and expand as the empire grew, pushing its network further and further across the conquered lands. Within the walls of these felt dwellings, critical operations took place. You stumble in, eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the smoke hole, and you see activity. There are cooks preparing meals, scribes transcribing messages, and stable hands tending to the horses. It's a hive of controlled chaos, all geared towards one objective, keeping the flow of information moving. Each yurt, though seemingly simple, represented a complex logistical node. It had to be provisioned with food, water, fuel, and fresh mounts, often in remote and challenging locations. This required an impressive degree of coordination and planning, far beyond what most contemporary societies could manage. A mainstream historical fact, the typical yurt, or jur as it's known in Mongolia today, consists of a wooden frame covered with felt and canvas, making it remarkably warm in winter and cool in summer. These yurts, while portable, were also hubs of intelligence. You overhear snippets of conversations, reports from distant skirmishes, news of trade routes, and perhaps even a bit of local gossip. They served not only as rest stops, but also as collection points for information, allowing the central government to maintain a real-time 13th century real-time understanding of events across the vast empire. Think of it like a decentralized branch office, constantly feeding data back to headquarters. A quirky or fringe tidbit: some sources suggest that these yurts were color-coded or decorated in specific ways to indicate their purpose or the rank of the official stationed there. A subtle form of visual branding. You're not just at any yurt, you're at a yurt, and everyone knows it. The strategic placement of these yurts was key. They weren't just randomly dotted across the landscape. They were carefully positioned along major roads, often at distances that a swift horse could cover in a day or less. This ensured a continuous, rapid relay of messages. Imagine a modern delivery company meticulously mapping out its distribution centers to optimize travel time. The Mongols were doing something remarkably similar, just with horses instead of semi-trucks. Historians still argue whether the initial distances between stations were uniform across the entire empire or varied based on terrain and population density. But regardless of the precise spacing, the goal was always the same: speed and reliability. So, as you rest your weary bones inside the warm embrace of the yurt, you begin to understand its true significance. It's more than just a shelter. It's a symbol of nomadic ingenuity, a testament to the Mongols' ability to adapt their traditional way of life to serve the demands of an empire. It's the central nervous system of a global superpower, built from felt, wood, and sheer determination. You might find yourself wishing for Wi-Fi, but you're experiencing a different kind of network, one forged in the heart of the steppe. You're sipping something warm inside the yurt, the crackle of the fire a comforting counterpoint to the endless wind outside. This is more than just a stopover. It's a vital node in the Yam system, the logistical backbone of the Mongol Empire. The Yam was Genghis Khan's answer to the challenge of governing a truly colossal territory, an innovative solution that allowed for rapid communication and control across thousands of miles. It wasn't just a postal service. It was the imperial nervous system, facilitating everything from military movements to tax collection. You are directly experiencing its efficiency, a stark contrast to the slow, cumbersome communication methods of other empires of the era. At its core, the Yam system operated on a simple yet revolutionary principle: speed through relay. Imagine you have a message, say, an urgent directive from the Great Khan himself. You, as the messenger, would receive this message and immediately mount a fresh horse provided at the station. You would then ride as fast as possible to the next Yam station, where another fresh horse and rider would be waiting. This continuous relay, sometimes involving dozens of riders over vast distances, allowed messages to travel with astonishing speed. We're talking about distances that would take weeks or even months by conventional travel, covered in a matter of days. A mainstream historical fact: Marco Polo, the famous Venetian traveler, marveled at the efficiency of the Yam system, noting that messages could travel up to 250 miles, approximately 300-400 kilometers, in a single day. Think about that for a second. That's faster than many forms of communication in Europe centuries later. The infrastructure required to support this system was immense. Each Yam station, or Ortu, as it was often called, needed to be regularly stocked with fresh horses, provisions for the riders, and sometimes even fodder for the animals. You're not just a rider, you're a beneficiary of this incredible logistical effort. You see the stacks of dried meat, the barrels of water, the neatly arranged saddles and bridles. It's all there, ready for the next leg of the journey. This meant that administrators had to constantly monitor supplies, manage staff, and ensure the security of each station. It was an early form of supply chain management on a truly epic scale, a quirky or fringe tidbit. Some accounts suggest that the Yam stations also served as informal intelligence gathering points, with station masters reporting on local conditions, troop movements, and any suspicious activities they observed. So, while you're resting, the station chief is probably writing a report about how quickly you ate your dinner. The Yam system wasn't just for official government dispatches. It also facilitated the movement of goods, diplomatic envoys, and even scholars and merchants. While official messages always took precedence, the system's widespread reach opened up new possibilities for trade and cultural exchange across the empire. You might share a meal with a merchant heading west, or a scholar journeying east, each using the Yem system to advance their own purposes. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of the Yem was military communication or general administrative control, as its benefits extended to so many aspects of imperial life. But one thing is clear: it transformed the way the Mongol Empire functioned. You stand up, feeling the renewed energy in your limbs. The message you carry, though you might not know its contents, is part of something monumental. You are a part of the greatest communication network the world had ever seen, a testament to the power of organized logistics. The next horse is waiting, saddled and ready. Time to ride. You swing yourself onto the fresh horse, the leather creaking under your weight, the chill morning air biting at your cheeks. This isn't just a casual trot. You're about to unleash the incredible feats of the Yem riders, and you are now one of them. Your muscles, though tired, still remember the rhythm of the ride, the instinctive sway with the horse's gait. The Mongol messenger was legendary for their endurance, capable of riding for days on end with minimal rest, pushing themselves and their mounts to the very limits. This wasn't just a job, it was a grueling test of physical and mental fortitude, a testament to the human body's capacity for sustained effort when driven by necessity. The pace is relentless. You're not just riding fast, you're riding purposefully, with an urgent message pressed against your chest. Its contents a secret held only by the highest echelons of the empire. Imagine the sheer concentration required, the constant vigilance for changes in terrain, for potential threats, all while maintaining a blistering speed. These riders often used multiple horses on a single leg of their journey, switching mounts mid-stride if necessary to maintain momentum. It's like an ancient equestrian pit stop, without the fancy tools and cheering crowds, just the silent understanding between rider and animal. A mainstream historical fact. Historical accounts describe Yem riders strapping themselves to their saddles to prevent falling off when exhaustion threatened to overcome them, allowing them to continue riding even while half asleep. You might feel a bit of that drowsy sway yourself as the miles blur into one endless gallop. Their training began young, steeped in the nomadic traditions of horsemanship that were intrinsic to Mongol culture. You recall stories from your youth, tales of riders who could shoot arrows accurately from a galloping horse, or who could identify distant landmarks in a swirling sandstorm. This wasn't just about riding fast. It was about an intuitive connection with the horse, an understanding of the step, and a deep-seated resilience. They knew how to conserve energy, how to read the subtle cues of their mounts, and how to navigate by stars and sun. A quirky or fringe tidbit, it said that some Yem riders would even carry a small piece of dried meat or cheese in their cheek, gnawing on it as they rode to maintain energy and hydration without having to stop. Think of it as the original energy bar, less palatable perhaps, but incredibly effective. The dangers were manifold. Beyond the sheer physical toll, you faced the unpredictable elements, sudden blizzards that could disorient you in minutes, scorching summer winds that could dehydrate you swiftly, or flash floods that turned a dry riverbed into a raging torrent. And then there were human threats: bandits, remnants of unconquered tribes, or even disgruntled locals. Your paisa, the golden or silver tablet signifying your imperial authority, offered some protection, but it wasn't a magical shield. You had to be alert, resourceful, and ready to defend yourself if the need arose. Historians still argue whether the Yem riders were primarily chosen from the warrior class, or if a distinct civilian corps of messengers developed over time. Regardless, their bravery and dedication were paramount. As you push your horse faster, the wind roaring in your ears, you realize the immense personal cost of this efficiency. These riders sacrificed comfort, safety, and sometimes their very lives, all in service of a system designed to bind an empire together. You feel the grit of the dust, the sting of the cold, and the unwavering resolve to reach the next station. Your endurance isn't just a personal trait. It's a critical component of the Mongol logistical machine. The pounding of hooves beneath you is the constant rhythm of the steppe, a primal beat that has accompanied you for days. This isn't just any horse, it's a Mongol horse, and its tireless stamina is the secret weapon, the literal horsepower unleashed that makes the Yem system truly astonishing. These aren't the large, majestic horses you might picture from European tapestries. They are compact, shaggy, and incredibly tough. Their smaller stature belies an immense capacity for endurance and speed over long distances, perfectly adapted to the unforgiving terrain and climate of the steppe. You feel its power surging beneath you, a living engine of bone and muscle. The Mongol horse can withstand extreme temperatures, forage for itself in sparse landscapes, and maintain a consistent, ground-covering pace for hours on end. They are masters of what you might call sustained effort. Unlike heavier European breeds, which might tire quickly under a heavy rider, the Mongol horse is built for marathon rides. They also possess an innate ability to navigate treacherous terrain, instinctively finding the safest path through rocky stretches or marshy ground. This intrinsic toughness meant fewer breakdowns, less need for specialized care, and a higher operational tempo for the YAM system. A mainstream historical fact: a Mongol horse can cover 100-120 kilometers, 60-75 miles a day for several days straight, a feat rarely matched by other breeds without significant rest. You can almost hear it whispering, "Are we there yet?"
No. Good, let's keep going.
The sheer number of horses available at each YAM station was another critical factor. You don't just get one horse, you get a fresh horse. This constant rotation ensured that the animals themselves weren't pushed beyond their limits, allowing the messenger to maintain maximum speed. Think of it like a fleet of rental cars constantly being swapped out at strategic points. This required a huge investment in horse breeding and management across the empire. The Mongols, being master horsemen, had a deep understanding of equine husbandry, ensuring a continuous supply of healthy, fit animals for the YAM. A quirky or fringe tidbit: it's believed that the Mongols sometimes trained their horses to follow each other in long lines, making it easier for a single rider to manage a string of fresh mounts, or for a group of riders to travel without losing formation in a dust storm. You can almost imagine a horse nudging yours, muttering about how the last rider was a bit heavy on the reins. The flexibility of the Mongol horse also contributed to the system's resilience. They were multi-purpose animals, used for war, transport, and, of course, the YAM. This meant that resources could be easily shifted and reallocated as needed. If a military campaign required a surge in postal traffic, horses could be diverted. If a particular route was temporarily impassable, alternative routes could be opened, with horses readily available. Historians still argue whether the extensive grazing required for the vast numbers of YAM horses led to long-term ecological changes on the steppe, particularly in regions with less resilient grasses. But from your perspective, all you know is that the horse beneath you is tireless, a living embodiment of efficiency. As you spur your mount onward, the wind whipping past, you feel an immense respect for these animals. They were not merely beasts of burden. They were partners in empire building, the silent, four-legged heroes of one of history's most impressive logistical networks. Their unflagging power is what keeps the message flowing, what allows the Great Khan's will to extend across mountains and deserts, connecting every distant corner of his colossal domain. The horse is the true unsung hero of this delivery service. You gallop through the vastness, the horse beneath you a tireless engine, until a cluster of structures slowly emerges on the horizon, another YAM station, a node in the vast network expansion that solidified the Mongol Empire's reach. This isn't just a random encampment, it's a deliberately placed, strategically vital component of the YAM system, meticulously planned to ensure optimal coverage and rapid communication. The expansion of this station network mirrored the expansion of the Empire itself, pushing the logistical frontier ever further. The strategic placement of these stations was a stroke of logistical genius. They weren't simply put wherever a suitable patch of grass existed. They were located at regular intervals, typically a day's ride apart, or about 25-30 miles, 40-50 km. This standardized spacing allowed for predictable travel times and efficient relay of messages. Imagine trying to coordinate an army across half a continent if you didn't know how long it would take a message to reach the next commander. This network provided that crucial predictability, a mainstream historical fact. The YAM network eventually stretched across an estimated 50,000 to 100,000 miles, 80,000 to 160,000 km of routes with thousands of individual stations, connecting nearly every major city and region within the Mongol dominion. It was the internet of the 13th century, just, with more horse poop. As you approach, you can see the layout. There's the main yurt, perhaps a few smaller ones for staff, corrals for the horses, and maybe even a small garden or well. Each station was a self-contained unit, designed to be self-sufficient for a period, able to house and feed messengers, provide fresh mounts, and perhaps even offer a basic level of repair for equipment. This modularity was key to the network's resilience. If one station was temporarily out of commission, the system could still function, albeit with some adjustments. because the surrounding stations were ready to pick up the slack. A quirky or fringe tidbit: some scholars suggest that the design and layout of YAM stations, with their focus on efficiency and standardized operation, might have been influenced by military encampment principles, applying battlefield logistics to peacetime communication. It's like a military base disguised as a comfy rest stop. The decision of where to establish new stations wasn't arbitrary. It involved surveying terrain, assessing resource availability like water and pasture for horses, and considering strategic points for control and administration. This forward planning was crucial to the system's success, transforming vast, undifferentiated wilderness into a structured, navigable network. You realize that every hill, every river crossing, every strategic pass had been considered in the grand design. Historians still argue whether the establishment of these stations was primarily driven by military necessity during campaigns, or by the need to consolidate administrative control over newly conquered territories. But either way, their meticulous placement ensured an unbroken chain of communication. You dismount, your legs wobbly, but your spirit invigorated by the sheer efficiency of it all. The expansion of this network wasn't just about covering more ground. It was about shrinking the world, making an impossibly large empire feel a little bit smaller, a little more manageable. It allowed the will of the Great Khan to project itself with incredible speed and authority across vast distances, cementing his power and facilitating the governance of his immense domain. You're not just at a station, you're at a pulse point of empire, a tangible manifestation of Mongol power and logistical prowess. The relentless onward march of these stations across the landscape meant the Mongols were always a step ahead, connecting the dots of their sprawling dominion. The warm aroma of cooking meat wafts from the yurt as you approach, a welcome assault on your senses after the cold, dust-filled ride. This is where the logistical genius of sustenance truly comes into play, how these YAM stations provisioned riders and fresh mounts in what were often incredibly remote locations. It wasn't just about having a few hay bales and a water skin. It was about ensuring a consistent, reliable supply chain that fed both man and beast, day in and day out, across thousands of miles of often hostile terrain. You step inside, and your eyes immediately scan the provisions. There are large sacks of grain, dried meat hanging from the rafters, and possibly some fermented mare's milk erag, a staple of the Mongol diet. The station master, a sturdy, no-nonsense individual, oversees the stores, meticulously tracking what comes in and what goes out. Maintaining these provisions required a sophisticated system of procurement and replenishment, often involving local communities or dedicated supply caravans. It's like running a chain of remote gas stations and diners, but with a lot more nomadic logistics involved. A mainstream historical fact: borts, or dried meat, was a crucial provision, as it was lightweight, highly nutritious, and could last indefinitely, making it ideal for long journeys and storage at YAM stations. It was the original MRE, just without the fancy packaging. The challenge wasn't just acquiring the food, it was ensuring its quality and quantity were sufficient for the constant flow of traffic. Imagine the calculations: how many riders pass through here daily? How many horses need feeding? What are the seasonal variations in travel? These station masters had to be keen observers and astute managers, balancing immediate needs with long-term supply planning. You might notice a large communal pot simmering over the fire, always ready to offer a hot meal to a weary traveler. This wasn't luxury dining. It was functional, calorically dense food designed to keep you going. A quirky or fringe tidbit: some historical sources indicate that YAM stations were occasionally provisioned with fermented vegetables or even specific herbs to help ward off illness among the riders. An early form of dietary supplement for a grueling job. Maybe that mystery green stuff in your bowl isn't just for flavor. The horses, too, required substantial provisioning. Vast tracts of land around each station were designated as pasture, ensuring that the fresh mounts had adequate grazing. But during harsh winters or periods of drought, supplemental feed would have been necessary. This often involved cultivating fodder or bringing in supplies from more fertile regions. It speaks to the Mongols' deep understanding of animal husbandry and resource management. Historians still argue whether the local populations were compelled to provide these provisions as a form of tax or tribute, or if a more structured system of payment and procurement was in place for the YAM system. But from your perspective, the food is here, and it's essential. As you refuel your body and prepare for the next leg of your journey, you appreciate the unseen logistical web that supports this system. Every bite of dried meat, every sip of warm water, every fresh horse waiting for you is a testament to an organizational feat that fed an empire on the move. It's a powerful lesson in just-in-time inventory and supply chain resilience, centuries before those terms were even conceived. You're not just eating, you're participating in a triumph of ancient logistics, a system that ensured the flow of information across a continent. You're back on the saddle, the landscape whizzing by, but your mind is still processing the information you picked up at the last Yem station. This is where the true purpose of the Yem system becomes clear. The critical flow of information that bound the vast Mongol Empire together. What exactly were these messages, and how were they handled? You're not just carrying a random scroll. You're part of a sophisticated information network, a human conduit for the pulse of the empire. The types of messages carried were incredibly varied, reflecting the diverse needs of governing such a colossal domain. You could be carrying urgent military dispatches detailing troop movements, enemy intelligence, or orders for commanders. These were often the most time-sensitive and critical messages, sometimes sealed with the Khan's personal stamp, to ensure their authenticity and priority. But you might also be carrying administrative decrees concerning tax collection, census information, or appointments of officials. Then there were diplomatic communications, letters from conquered rulers pledging fealty or requests for supplies. Even more mundane, but no less important, were reports on local conditions, agricultural yields, or even reports of unusual weather phenomena. A mainstream historical fact, official messages were often written in the Mongol script, which was adapted from the Uyghur script, ensuring a standardized form of written communication across the empire, regardless of the numerous spoken languages. This standardization was crucial for clarity and speed. The format of these messages was practical. They were typically written on scrolls of paper or silk, durable materials that could withstand the rigors of travel. Sometimes, they were encased in protective cylinders or bags to shield them from the elements. As a messenger, you would be responsible for their safe delivery, often carrying them in a pouch worn close to your body. You understand the gravity of your responsibility. Losing a message could have severe consequences. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Some historians speculate that certain highly sensitive military messages might have been transmitted orally, with riders memorizing coded phrases to prevent interception, though this would have been much less reliable for complex instructions. Imagine trying to remember a 500-word strategic plan while galloping across the steppe. Talk about a memory challenge! The information flow wasn't just one way, from the center outwards. The Yem system also served as a crucial feedback loop. Local governors, military commanders, and even Yem station masters regularly sent reports back to the capital, providing vital intelligence on local conditions, potential unrest, or resource availability. This bidirectional flow of information allowed the central government to make informed decisions and respond quickly to emerging situations. It was an early form of real-time situational awareness for an empire that spanned continents. Historians still argue whether the Yem system was truly an efficient means of gathering intelligence, or if local officials often exaggerated their reports to appease the central authorities, leading to a degree of misinformation. But regardless of the occasional embellishment, the framework for data collection was undeniably present. As you ride, you feel the subtle weight of the scroll you carry, a tangible link in this ancient communication chain. It's more than just paper. It's the lifeblood of an empire, the invisible threads that weave together disparate lands and peoples under a single authority. You are not just a messenger. You are a data packet, a vital part of the Mongol information superhighway. The wind whips past your ears, a constant companion as you ride. But your thoughts are focused on the quiet efficiency you've witnessed at the Yem stations. A key element behind this astounding speed and reliability was standardization, a principle that brought immense benefits to the Yem system and ensured its smooth operation across a vast, diverse empire. Imagine the chaos if every station operated differently, or if messages were formatted in a myriad of ways. The Mongols, surprisingly for a nomadic people, understood the power of uniformity. From the distance between stations to the types of provisions available, a remarkable level of standardization was enforced throughout the Yam network. You noticed it immediately. The yurts are similar in size, the corrals are similarly structured, and the procedures for exchanging horses and messages are remarkably consistent. This wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate policy to create a predictable and efficient system. A mainstream historical fact. The distances between YAM stations were generally standardized to ensure that a rider could reach the next station within a day, allowing for a consistent travel speed across the empire. This uniformity greatly simplified scheduling and logistics. Think of it as ancient highway planning, complete with regulated rest stops. This standardization extended to the administrative practices as well. Station masters were likely given clear guidelines on how to manage their resources, how to record incoming and outgoing messages, and how to handle messengers. This reduced ambiguity and ensured that a messenger arriving at any YAM station, regardless of its location, would know exactly what to expect and what was expected of them. This uniformity simplified training for staff and riders, making the system easier to scale and manage. A quirky or fringe tidbit, it's rumored that the Mongols even standardized the size and type of paisa, the golden or silver tablets carried by messengers, so that their authority was instantly recognizable to anyone, anywhere in the empire. You're not just a guy on a horse. You're an officially branded imperial agent. The standardization of information itself was also crucial. As mentioned before, the adoption of the Mongol script helped immensely, but so did standardized forms for official reports and messages. This ensured clarity and reduced the chances of misinterpretation as messages traveled across different linguistic regions. Imagine trying to run a global corporation if every department used a different language and formatting for their reports. Pure pandemonium. The Mongols understood this implicitly. Historians still argue whether the degree of standardization was uniformly enforced across the entire empire, or if there were regional variations due to practical difficulties and cultural differences. But the intent, at least, was clearly towards a highly regulated system. As you push your horse onward, you appreciate this invisible framework of uniformity. It's what makes the seemingly impossible possible. It's what allows you, a lone rider, to traverse thousands of miles, knowing that at each stop, the system will function exactly as it should, reliably and efficiently. Standardization isn't just about order, it's about speed, reliability, and the power to connect a truly sprawling empire, turning a chaotic wilderness into a predictable, manageable network. You're riding on the very principles of modern logistics. Centuries before their formal articulation, the sun begins to dip towards the horizon, painting the vast steppe in hues of orange and purple. While the YAM system was a marvel of efficiency, it was also a critical instrument of imperial power, and as such, security measures were paramount. You, as a messenger, aren't just carrying a message, you're carrying vital information, and protecting it, and yourself, is a constant concern. The open nature of the steppe, while ideal for fast travel, also made it susceptible to attack. The most obvious security measure was the paisa you carry. This tablet, usually made of gold, silver, or bronze, engraved with the imperial seal and sometimes specific permissions, was your pass. It instantly identified you as an official Mongol messenger, granting you access to fresh horses and provisions at YAM stations, and crucially, protecting you from harassment by local populations, or even other Mongol forces. It was a visible sign of the Great Khan's authority, and ignoring it could lead to severe penalties. A mainstream historical fact. The paisa was so effective that it was sometimes borrowed by foreign dignitaries or merchants who wished to travel safely and quickly through Mongol territory, effectively acting as an ancient diplomatic passport and express pass. You're practically a VIP with an all-access pass. Beyond the paisa, the YAM stations themselves offered a degree of security. While not heavily fortified castles, their presence as organized imperial outposts often deterred casual banditry. The station masters and their staff would likely have been armed, and the presence of a few battle-hardened Mongol warriors or local guards wouldn't have been unusual. You feel a subtle sense of relief as you see the familiar yurts emerge, knowing that a measure of safety awaits. A quirky or fringe tidbit. There are some accounts that suggest specific YAM routes were patrolled by small detachments of cavalry, especially in areas prone to unrest or along borders, offering a mobile security force to protect the messengers and the stations. So, you might have had a cavalry escort without even realizing it. The very speed of the system was also a form of security. Messages traveled so quickly that intercepting them would have been incredibly difficult. By the time a potential enemy realized a message was passing through their territory, it would often be long gone. This rapid transit minimized exposure time and reduced the opportunities for interception or espionage. It was a classic hit-and-run approach to information security. Historians still argue whether the YEM system employed any form of rudimentary encryption or coded language for highly sensitive messages, beyond simply trusting the messenger's discretion. But the reliance on speed and the Pisa suggests a more direct approach to security. You're constantly aware of your surroundings, scanning the horizon, listening for unusual sounds. The vastness of the steppe can be deceptive. Danger can emerge swiftly from nowhere. But you also know that the system is designed to minimize these risks, to get you and your precious cargo to the next safe haven as quickly as possible. The security measures of the YEM weren't just about protecting messengers. They were about safeguarding the very arteries of the empire, ensuring that the Khan's will and his critical intelligence flowed unimpeded across his colossal domain. You are a silent, vital part of that protected flow. The rhythmic pounding of your horse's hooves against the earth is almost hypnotic, a constant reminder of the unseen forces at play. You, as a messenger, are not just a delivery person. You are a tangible thread in the complex web of control and centralization that the YEM system enabled for the Mongol Empire. This incredible logistical network was far more than a mere postal service. It was the sinews and nerves of imperial power, allowing the Great Khan to exert his authority and direct his vast domain from the capital. The YEM system allowed for unprecedented centralized control over an empire that spanned continents. Before its advent, governing such a vast territory would have been nigh impossible. Orders would take months to reach distant commanders, and reports from the periphery would be woefully out of date upon arrival. The YEM drastically shrunk these communication delays, enabling the Khan to issue timely commands, receive real-time intelligence, and enforce his will with remarkable swiftness. Imagine trying to manage a global enterprise with only snail mail. Now imagine doing it with a direct line to every regional manager. That's the leap the YEM represented. A mainstream historical fact, the YEM system allowed the Mongol capital, first Karakorum and later Kombolok, modern Beijing, to remain surprisingly well informed about events across the empire, facilitating coordinated military campaigns and efficient administration. It was the original command and control center. You carry the physical manifestation of this control, a scroll containing direct orders or urgent requests. The authority of the YEM was absolute. Its messengers and their missions took precedence over almost everything else. Local officials were compelled to provide support, resources, and even fresh horses on demand. This top-down authority, enforced by the YEM, ensured that the imperial center's directives were executed without significant delay or obstruction. It was a clear demonstration of where power resided, a quirky or fringe tidbit. Some accounts suggest that interfering with a YEM messenger or attempting to impede their progress was considered a grave offense, punishable by death, underscoring the vital importance of the system to imperial governance. You're not just carrying a message, you're carrying the Khan's wrath if anyone gets in your way. The system also fostered political cohesion by regularly connecting distant provinces and military outposts to the imperial center. The YEM helped to integrate disparate regions into a unified whole. It prevented local governors from acting with too much autonomy, as their actions could be swiftly reported back to the capital and directives could be issued just as quickly. Historians still argue whether the YEM system's primary impact was on military coordination during conquest or on the long-term administrative stability and consolidation of the empire. But regardless of the emphasis, its centralizing effect is undeniable. As you ride, you feel the subtle weight of that authority. You are not just a rider on the wind. You are a critical artery through which the lifeblood of Mongol imperial power flows. This network wasn't just about logistics. It was about political architecture, binding together a monumental empire with threads of information, ensuring that every distant part remained connected and subservient to the central will. The YEM truly transformed a collection of conquered lands into a centrally managed, formidable global power, a testament to the power of efficient communication as a tool of governance. The wind carries the scent of distant pastures, and beneath you, your horse continues its tireless pace. But the YEM system, as you are now intimately aware, wasn't solely about military dispatches or administrative control. It also had a profound economic impact, facilitating trade and broader administration across the vast Mongol Empire. You, as a part of this network, are witnessing the arteries of commerce and governance being laid down across a continent. The very existence of a rapid and relatively secure communication network greatly reduced the risks and uncertainties associated with long-distance trade. Merchants, knowing that they could send and receive messages, verify orders, or even get reports on market conditions, were more willing to embark on journeys across the empire. The Yem stations themselves often became informal trading posts, where local goods could be exchanged and information about trade routes could be shared. This indirectly boosted economic activity across the vast Mongol realm. A mainstream historical fact, the Pax Mongolica, the period of relative peace imposed by the Mongol Empire, fostered safe travel and increased trade along the Silk Road, and the Yem system was a crucial infrastructural component supporting this economic boom. You're basically part of the early global supply chain. Think of it, if you're a merchant from, say, Persia, and you want to trade with China, the ability to send ahead inquiries about demand or prices, or to coordinate your caravan's movements, was invaluable. This certainty allowed for better planning, reduced losses, and ultimately stimulated larger volumes of trade. You might even see merchants traveling along the Yem routes, sometimes even using the Yem for their own urgent messages, albeit usually at a premium or with special imperial permission. A quirky or fringe tidbit: some sources suggest that Yem stations occasionally housed small markets or bazaars, where local goods could be sold to passing messengers and travelers, providing a supplementary income for the station staff and offering convenience to those on the move. So, you could grab a quick souvenir along with your fresh horse. Beyond direct trade, the Yem system was instrumental in the broader economic administration of the empire. It allowed for the efficient collection of taxes and tribute, as messages could be sent quickly to and from regional administrators. It facilitated the movement of goods required by the central government, like provisions for the army or specialized materials for imperial projects. It also enabled the central government to monitor economic conditions across the empire, identifying areas of surplus or deficit, and making more informed economic decisions. Historians still argue whether the Yem system was primarily funded through direct taxation on local populations or through the profits generated by its various ancillary services and associated trade, but its cost-effectiveness in supporting imperial administration was clear. As you ride, you see not just empty plains, but the faint tracks of countless caravans, the ghost of an empire built on efficient communication and supported trade. The Yem system was an unsung hero of the Mongol economy, a silent facilitator of wealth and resources, transforming vast, disparate regions into a more interconnected economic zone. You are not just carrying messages, you are carrying the very pulse of economic activity, binding together a continent not just by military might, but by the swift flow of goods and information. The sun begins its slow descent, painting the boundless horizon in hues of amber and violet, but your journey continues, a tireless speck on an enormous map. And that's precisely the point. The Yem system, beyond its role in communication and trade, played a crucial, perhaps underestimated, role in mapping the empire and fostering geographic knowledge. You're not just traversing a route, you're contributing to the very understanding of the vast Mongol dominion. Imagine trying to administer an empire of this size without accurate maps or detailed knowledge of its geography. Impossible, right? The Yem system, by its very nature, forced a systematic understanding of the terrain. The regular routes, the fixed distances between stations, and the constant travel by thousands of messengers meant that detailed geographical information was being collected, if not formally mapped in the modern sense, then certainly implicitly understood and recorded. Each rider was a data point, an explorer contributing to a vast mental map of the empire. A mainstream historical fact. The Mongols were known to create detailed route maps and administrative charts, often based on information gathered by their messengers and military scouts, which were crucial for governing their vast territories. These weren't your tourist maps, they were tools of imperial power. The station masters, as they oversaw the flow of riders and messages, would have developed an intimate knowledge of their local area and the routes leading to adjacent stations. This localized geographical knowledge, when combined with reports from other stations, would have allowed the central administration to develop a comprehensive understanding of the empire's layout. You might overhear a station master giving directions to a new rider, describing landmarks, water sources, or tricky stretches of terrain, all contributing to a collective geographical intelligence. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Some scholars suggest that the Mongols might have used mnemonic devices or oral traditions to pass on geographical knowledge to new generations of riders, turning long routes into epic poems or songs that were easier to remember than written maps. Imagine learning your delivery route by singing it. The continuous travel across such vast and varied landscapes also exposed the Mongols to new environments, cultures, and geographical features. This constant exploration, driven by the needs of the Yem, expanded their understanding of the world significantly. They encountered mountains, deserts, forests, and rivers that were vastly different from their steppe homeland, forcing them to adapt their logistics and strategies. Historians still argue whether the Mongols developed a truly systematic cartographic tradition, or if their geographical knowledge remained primarily practical and utilitarian, focused on route efficiency rather than abstract mapping. But the practical effect was undeniably a deeper understanding of their colossal realm. As you ride, you see not just the immediate path before you, but the broader contours of the land, the rivers you cross, the mountains you skirt. You are part of an ongoing process of discovery and documentation, however informal. The Yem system was not just a communication network. It was a vast, sprawling survey project, constantly refining the Mongols' understanding of their own world. It turned the unknown into the familiar, the distant into the accessible, and the vast into the manageable, all through the tireless hooves of horses and the watchful eyes of its messengers. You're mapping the world, one gallop at a time. The stars are beginning to emerge, a pinprick tapestry against the velvet sky, as you approach another Yam station. But as you dismount, you realize that the usefulness of these postal yurts stretched far beyond just carrying messages. Their function was surprisingly versatile, exploring other uses that made them indispensable nodes in the fabric of the Mongol Empire. These weren't just mail rooms. They were multi-purpose imperial service centers. Beyond the urgent dispatches and the more mundane administrative reports, the Yem system facilitated the movement of people, not just messengers, but diplomatic envoys, high-ranking officials, and sometimes even foreign guests. If you were a distinguished visitor to the Great Khan's court, you might be granted a paisa and allowed to use the Yam for your journey, experiencing the speed and efficiency firsthand. This expedited diplomatic missions and allowed for faster integration of conquered territories by enabling quicker movement of imperial representatives. A mainstream historical fact: Marco Polo himself famously used the Yem system during his travels through the Mongol Empire, testifying to its incredible efficiency and the widespread use of paisa for authorized travelers. You're riding in the footsteps of history's most famous traveler. The yurts also served as temporary accommodations for these various travelers. You might share a fire with a diplomat from Persia, a scholar from China, or even a European missionary, all utilizing the same imperial infrastructure. This fostered cultural exchange and the dissemination of ideas across the empire, even if indirectly. The yurts became melting pots of information, gossip, and cultural interaction. A quirky or fringe tidbit: some historians suggest that Yem stations occasionally served as impromptu legal or administrative offices, where a traveling imperial official might hear petitions or resolve minor disputes from local populations who came to the station for services or news. Imagine going to the post office to settle a land dispute! Furthermore, the Yem stations were critical for supplying military campaigns. While not their primary function, their network of stocked provisions and fresh horses could be quickly repurposed to support troop movements or resupply efforts during wartime. If an army was campaigning in a distant region, the Yem stations along their route could become temporary logistical hubs, funneling supplies and intelligence to the front lines. This flexibility was another testament to the system's ingenuity and adaptability. Historians still argue whether the Yem system was specifically designed with military logistical support as a primary-secondary function, or if this capability emerged organically from its existing infrastructure. But its utility in wartime was undeniable. As you lean back against the yurt's felt wall, the quiet hum of the steppe settling around you, you reflect on the multifaceted role of these seemingly simple structures. They were not just for mail. They were the arteries of an empire's diplomatic, administrative, and even military life. They were the physical manifestation of imperial reach, binding together a colossal territory with threads of communication, travel, and strategic support. You're not just resting. You're witnessing the intricate gears of an ancient global network at work. The air inside the yurt grows cooler as the night deepens, and you find yourself contemplating the inevitable ebb and flow of empires. Even the most formidable systems, like the Yem, eventually face decline and leave behind a complex legacy. The Mongol Empire itself fragmented, and with its fragmentation, the need for such an expansive and centrally managed postal network diminished. You can almost feel the whispers of history, foretelling the waning of this incredible logistical machine. The decline of the Yem system was directly tied to the political trajectory of the Mongol Empire. As the vast empire fractured into various khanates, the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, the Yuan dynasty in China, and the Chagatai Khanate, the unified central authority that had sustained the Yem, began to crumble. Each khanate developed its own regional postal systems, often less extensive or standardized than the original imperial Yem. The need for a single, continent-spanning network simply ceased to exist as political unity dissolved. A mainstream historical fact, while elements of the Yem system continued in various successor states, particularly the Yuan dynasty in China, the grand, unified network that spanned from Eastern Europe to the Pacific largely disappeared with the breakup of the unified Mongol Empire. It was like a global company decentralizing its operations, only with more horses and less HR. Economic shifts also played a role. As trade routes changed, and as some regions became more settled and developed their own local infrastructure, the reliance on the Yam as the sole means of rapid transport lessened. Maintaining such a vast network was incredibly expensive, requiring immense resources in horses, personnel, and provisions. Without the singular focus and vast resources of a unified empire, the economic burden became unsustainable for fragmented regional powers. You can imagine the accountants in each khanate squinting at the ledger, wondering how to justify the massive expense for a network that now only served a fraction of its original purpose. A quirky or fringe tidbit: some later khanates tried to adapt portions of the Yam for purely commercial purposes, essentially turning it into a for-profit express courier service, though these efforts rarely achieved the same scale or efficiency as the original imperial system. Your old job as a messenger might have been privatized! Yet, the legacy of the Yam was profound and long-lasting. Its influence can be seen in later postal systems, particularly in China and Persia, where elements of its organization and relay principles were adopted and adapted. The very idea of a rapid, standardized, centrally managed communication network had been firmly established. It demonstrated the sheer power of efficient logistics in governance, military affairs, and even economic development. Historians still argue whether the decline of the Yam was primarily a consequence of the political fragmentation of the empire, or if inherent logistical and economic challenges eventually made the system unsustainable in the long run. But its innovative design continued to inspire. As you gaze at the dying embers in the Yurts fire, you reflect on the cyclical nature of power and infrastructure. Even as the Grand Yam system faded into history, its innovative principles, its sheer audacity in connecting a world, continued to resonate. You might not be galloping across a unified empire anymore, but the lessons learned from those relentless rides, from the ingenuity of the Mongol postal Yurts, Linja, they are the foundations upon which modern logistical thought would eventually be built, a silent testament to an empire that understood the power of connection. You are now witnessing the quiet passing of a truly revolutionary system. You shift your weight, no longer on a horse, but perhaps settling deeper into your bed. Yet, the lessons from those dusty steppe rides, the very essence of the Yem system, are remarkably relevant to modern parallels in logistics. You might think that a 13th century postal network has little to teach your world of fiber optics and drone deliveries. But you'd be surprised. The core principles remain strikingly similar, echoing across centuries. Consider modern express courier services. What do they rely on? A network of strategically placed hubs, rapid transportation, and a relay system to move packages swiftly from point A to point B sound familiar. The Yem system was the progenitor of this concept. FedEx, UPS, DHL, they are all, in a sense, spiritual descendants of the Mongol postal Yurts. They operate on the principle of minimizing dwell time and maximizing transit speed through efficient handoffs. A mainstream historical fact, modern logistical theory, particularly in supply chain management, emphasizes the importance of network design, hub and spoke models, and rapid transit, principles directly observable in the ancient Yem system. It's like discovering that your favorite podcast was actually inspired by a really old telegram. Think about the importance of standardization. Remember how the Mongols standardized distances, procedures, and even message formats. This is fundamental to any modern logistics operation. Imagine if every Amazon warehouse had different sorting rules, or if every trucking company used different shipping labels.
Chaos!
Standardization ensures interoperability, scalability, and efficiency. It allows for seamless flow, just as it did for the Mongol messengers. You recognize that the smooth operation of your own deliveries, from food to furniture, relies on the same basic idea that a 13th century Khan figured out for his empire. A quirky or fringe tidbit: some logistics consultants today still use historical case studies, like the YEM system, in their training programs to illustrate fundamental principles of network design and operational efficiency, proving that ancient wisdom still holds water in boardrooms. Your history lesson is actually cutting-edge business advice. The idea of decentralization with centralized control is another powerful parallel. The YEM stations were distributed nodes, each with a degree of autonomy, but all operating under a unified imperial directive. This mirrors modern distributed logistics networks, where regional distribution centers manage local operations while adhering to global corporate strategies. It's about empowering the edges while maintaining a strong core. Historians still argue whether the level of autonomy granted to individual YEM station masters was truly effective, or if it sometimes led to inconsistencies in service quality. But the core idea of a distributed yet controlled network is undeniably modern. As you settle deeper, perhaps drifting towards sleep, you realize that the fundamental challenges of moving things and information across distances haven't really changed. Only the technology has. The Mongol postal yurts weren't just a historical curiosity. They were a blueprint, a masterclass in how to build a resilient, efficient, and scalable logistical system. You're finding echoes of the steppe in every package delivered to your door, a silent testament to the enduring lessons of ancient ingenuity. You're no longer breathing the dusty air of the steppe, but perhaps the clean, filtered air of your bedroom. Yet, the concept of data, that abstract currency of the modern world, finds its surprising ancient counterpart in the information flowing through the YEM system. Comparing ancient messages to modern data streams reveals a profound continuity in the underlying principles of information management, regardless of the technological medium. Think of the scrolls you carried. A military report, a tax decree, a diplomatic letter. These were all forms of structured data. They contained specific information, intended for specific recipients, and were crucial for decision-making. Just as a modern company collects sales figures, customer feedback, and market trends, the Mongols gathered intelligence on troop movements, resource availability, and local unrest. The medium was different: paper and silk, instead of gigabytes and cloud servers, but the purpose was identical: to gather, transmit, and process information to maintain control and make informed decisions. A mainstream historical fact, the Mongol Empire's systematic collection of census data, agricultural reports, and even detailed travelogues was groundbreaking for its time, providing a rich dataset for imperial administration. They were data hoarders before it was cool. The speed of transmission was paramount for both. Just as modern financial markets demand instantaneous data updates, the Mongols needed rapid intelligence from their far-flung territories to react to military threats or administrative challenges. The YEM system, by reducing message transit time from months to days, effectively sped up their data pipeline, allowing for quicker analysis and response. Imagine trying to make a critical business decision based on data that's 6 months old. Impossible! The Mongols understood this inherent need for speed in their information ecosystem. A quirky or fringe tidbit: some researchers have even suggested that the Mongols, through their intelligence gathering and communication networks, were among the first to effectively utilize big data, vast quantities of information collected from diverse sources, to inform their military and administrative strategies, albeit on a pre-computer scale. You're basically part of the first big data analytics team. The challenge of ensuring data integrity and security also has clear parallels. The PIs authenticated the messenger, ensuring the data packet was legitimate. The security measures at YEM stations protected the data in transit. While they didn't have encryption algorithms, their methods aimed to prevent tampering or interception, much like modern cybersecurity protocols. Historians still argue whether the Mongols had a sophisticated system for verifying the accuracy of reports, or if they primarily relied on the trustworthiness of their messengers and the inherent redundancy of their network. But the concern for data quality was certainly present. As you drift towards sleep, you can almost see the ancient scrolls transforming into shimmering streams of binary code, racing across continents. The fundamental human need to communicate, to transmit knowledge, and to leverage information for power and efficiency is timeless. The Mongol postal yurts, with their humble felt walls, were the original data centers, processing the lifeblood of an empire. You realize that the information age didn't begin with silicon chips. It began with the realization that knowledge, effectively gathered and swiftly disseminated, is power, and that was something the Mongols mastered. The quiet hum of your room contrasts sharply with the imagined thundering hooves. Yet the challenges of last-mile delivery, getting a product from a central hub to the final customer, are as old as time itself, and the YEM system offers surprising lessons here. You might be waiting for a package to arrive at your doorstep, a modern manifestation of a problem the Mongols grappled with daily. While the YEM excelled at long-haul transmission, the last mile, getting a message from the final YEM station to its ultimate recipient, be it a distant military camp, a nomadic chieftain's encampment, or a remote administrative outpost, still presented unique challenges. The standardized network might end, and then specialized local knowledge, improvisation, and smaller, more agile delivery methods would come into play. It wasn't always a smooth, paved road directly to the Khan's tent. A mainstream historical fact. Historical accounts indicate that after reaching a YEM station, messengers might then rely on local guides, smaller groups of riders, or even on foot travel in particularly difficult terrain, demonstrating the need for adaptable final delivery solutions. This is where your modern delivery driver has to navigate tricky driveways and grumpy dogs. Think of the variability. One last-mile delivery might be to a fortified city gate, another to a scattered group of herders in a valley, and yet another to a temporary army encampment moving across the plains. Each required a flexible approach. The YEM system provided the robust trunk lines, but the final leg demanded local expertise and adaptability. This highlights a crucial lesson. A well-designed network needs to consider both the backbone infrastructure and the specialized solutions required for reaching the final, diverse endpoints. You appreciate the complex choreography involved in getting that single package from a warehouse to your specific address. A quirky or fringe tidbit. It's rumored that some YEM station masters maintained a small network of local scouts or guides who specialized in navigating particularly difficult or undocumented last-mile routes, almost like a specialized final-mile delivery team. They were the original local experts. The efficiency of the last mile often determined the overall speed of the message. A message could fly across thousands of miles in days, only to be delayed for hours or even a full day if the final recipient was hard to locate or the terrain was impassable. This underscores the importance of optimizing every leg of the journey, not just the fastest ones. Historians still argue whether the Mongols formally recognized the last mile as a distinct logistical challenge within the YEM system, or if it was simply absorbed into the general duties of the messengers and local officials. But the practical reality of this final segment was undeniable. As you close your eyes, perhaps imagining that final leg of a journey across the ancient steppe, you connect with a challenge that transcends time. The problem of getting something from here to there, precisely and efficiently, end to end, remains a fundamental logistical puzzle. The Mongol postal yurts taught us that even the most impressive long-haul system is only as good as its ability to complete the final delivery. You realize that your takeaway pizza and the Khan's urgent war orders share a common, ancient logistical DNA. You're drifting deeper now, the sounds of the modern world fading as you return to the whispering winds of the steppe. One of the most astonishing aspects of the YEM system was its scalability secrets, how it managed to expand from a regional network into a continent-spanning imperial lifeline. Understanding this scaling is crucial, as it holds timeless lessons for any organization seeking to grow its operations. Whether it's a global tech company or a rapidly expanding delivery service, the primary secret to the YEM's scalability was its modularity and standardization. As you remember, each YEM station was a self-contained unit, equipped with horses, provisions, and staff operating under a consistent set of rules. This modular design meant that as the empire expanded, new stations could be plugged into the existing network relatively easily. You didn't need to reinvent the wheel every time a new territory was conquered. You simply replicated a proven model. This allowed for rapid expansion without sacrificing efficiency. A mainstream historical fact. The YEM system was expanded rapidly during the reigns of Genghis Khan and his successors, following the path of their conquests and establishing new stations in newly acquired territories to secure administrative control and communication. It was the original copy-paste growth strategy. The Mongols also leveraged their existing infrastructure and skills. Their nomadic lifestyle meant they were already masters of horse management, long-distance travel, and temporary encampments like yurts. The Yem system wasn't built from scratch by an entirely new set of skills. It was an extension and formalization of existing capabilities. This inherent cultural fit meant that scaling the system was a natural progression, not a forced imposition. You might recall learning to ride almost before you could walk. It's a way of life, not just a job, a quirky or fringe tidbit. It's speculated that the very simplicity of the yurt's design and construction made it easy to replicate quickly, and in large numbers, a kind of ancient flat pack housing that facilitated rapid network expansion. The original IKA solution for logistics. The hierarchical and disciplined nature of the Mongol military and administration also contributed to its scalability. Orders from the central authority were clear and generally obeyed without question, ensuring that the necessary resources and manpower were allocated for Yam expansion. This top-down enforcement allowed for swift implementation of new network nodes and routes. Historians still argue whether the rapid expansion of the Yem system was sustainable in the long term without placing undue strain on local resources, or if its ultimate decline was partly due to overextension. But its initial ability to scale was extraordinary. As you picture the endless plains, you realize that the Yem's ability to scale was a testament to robust planning, repeatable processes, and a clear vision. It didn't just grow organically. It was a deliberate, engineered expansion. It teaches us that to scale effectively, you need a repeatable unit, standardized procedures, and a strong organizational backbone to implement and manage that growth. You're learning the secrets of global domination, one yurt at a time. The quiet hum of the steppe carries the echoes of a colossal logistical triumph, one built on the principles of efficient expansion. The subtle sounds of the night envelop you now, but your mind continues to wander back to the steppe. The Yem system, you realize, was a masterclass in decentralized nodes operating within a centralized framework. The distributed nature of the Postal Yurt system offers powerful insights into network resilience and efficiency, even in today's interconnected world. Each Yam station was, in essence, a decentralized node. It had its own staff, its own supply of horses, and its own local knowledge. While operating under central imperial directives, each station functioned with a degree of autonomy, managing its daily operations and responding to immediate local needs. This distributed responsibility meant that the entire system wasn't vulnerable to a single point of failure. If one station faced a temporary disruption, perhaps a shortage of horses or an attack, the surrounding nodes could still function, maintaining the overall flow of messages. A mainstream historical fact unlike a single, vulnerable central hub. The distributed nature of the Yem system meant that even if parts of the network were disrupted by local conflicts or natural disasters, other routes and stations could often pick up the slack, ensuring continuity of service. It was the original distributed ledger, just with more manual entries. This distributed architecture also allowed for efficient local resource management. The station masters, being on the ground, could adapt to specific local conditions, whether it was a harsh winter requiring different fodder or a seasonal migration route that needed adjustments. They were empowered to make decisions that best served their immediate operational needs, rather than waiting for distant central approval for every minor detail. This agility at the edges contributed significantly to the system's overall robustness. You imagine a local manager making a quick decision to buy extra feed from a nearby village, rather than waiting for an imperial caravan that might be weeks away. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Some accounts suggest that Yem stations also served as informal local community centers in remote areas, providing a point of contact with the imperial authority, and sometimes even offering basic medical aid or shelter to distressed travelers, further integrating them into the local fabric. Your local post office used to be a community hub for medical emergencies. However, this decentralization was balanced by strong centralized control. The Paisa ensured uniform authority. The standardized procedures maintained consistency, and the regular reports back to the capital kept the central administration informed. It wasn't a free-for-all. It was a carefully managed balance between local autonomy and overarching imperial direction. Historians still argue whether the balance between central control and local autonomy within the YEM system was consistently maintained across the vast empire, or if regional variations in governance sometimes led to inconsistencies in service or even corruption. But the intent of a robust, distributed network was clear. As you consider this delicate balance, you recognize its modern echoes. Distributed computing networks, decentralized energy grids, and even global supply chains all grapple with this same tension. How to leverage the resilience and efficiency of distributed nodes while maintaining centralized oversight and strategic direction. The Mongol postal yurts, with their simple felt walls and tireless riders, provided a powerful, ancient blueprint for this organizational challenge. You're now seeing the origins of network architecture in the most unlikely of places. The very layout of the steppe network embodies a sophisticated understanding of distributed systems, centuries ahead of its time. The silence of your room is profound, but in your mind, you can still hear the distant rumble of hooves, a testament to the sheer ingenuity of the YEM system's resilience and redundancy. In a world without backup servers or satellite communication, the Mongols built a communication network that could withstand significant disruptions, offering invaluable lessons in how to create robust, fault-tolerant systems. The primary mechanism for resilience was built-in redundancy. The YEM network wasn't just a single, linear path. It often had multiple routes connecting key centers. If one route became impassable due to weather, conflict, or natural disaster, messages could be rerouted along an alternative path. This multi-path design ensured that communication could continue even in the face of localized failures. Imagine a modern highway system with several alternative routes between major cities. The Mongols had a similar concept, just on horseback. A mainstream historical fact. During periods of intense military campaigning or environmental hardship, Mongol commanders would often establish temporary alternative YEM routes or supplement existing ones, demonstrating a flexible approach to maintaining communication flow. They weren't afraid to go off-road for a delivery. Each YEM station, as a self-contained unit, also contributed to redundancy. If a station suffered a temporary setback, perhaps a shortage of horses or an outbreak of disease among staff, the adjacent stations could potentially stretch their resources or extend their leg of the journey, albeit with some delay, to keep the overall chain moving. This localized resilience prevented a single point of failure from crippling the entire network. You realize that your own access to multiple internet providers, or the ability of a delivery company to shift packages between different regional sorting centers, stems from this same ancient principle. A quirky or fringe tidbit, there are some anecdotal accounts of YEM riders carrying emergency rations or basic repair tools for their horses, acting as mini mobile support units, further enhancing their individual resilience in case of unexpected delays between stations. They were the original roadside assistants. The standardization of procedures and the training of messengers also played a role. Because every messenger knew the system and every station operated uniformly, it was easier to slot in new riders or retask existing ones if a particular segment of the network faced challenges. This human redundancy, coupled with the systemic redundancy, created a network that was remarkably robust against disruptions. Historians still argue whether the YEM system was explicitly designed with a formal concept of redundancy in mind, or if its resilient qualities were simply a natural outcome of practical solutions to the inherent challenges of the steppe environment. But its effectiveness in maintaining communication under duress is undeniable. As you drift towards slumber, you understand that the YEM system offers profound insights into building systems that endure. In a world increasingly reliant on complex, interconnected networks, the Mongol approach of built-in flexibility, alternative paths, and distributed resources offers timeless lessons in creating systems that don't just work when everything is perfect, but can withstand the inevitable chaos of the real world. You're learning the secrets of disaster recovery, straight from the dusty plains of Mongolia. The ancient ingenuity of the steppe people provided a blueprint for networks that simply refused to break. The soft glow of your bedside lamp casts long shadows, but your mind is still illuminated by the brilliance of the YEM system, particularly its sophisticated feedback loops. This wasn't just a one-way pipeline for imperial orders. Information flowed both ways, a crucial element for adaptive governance and successful empire management. You realize that even in this ancient system, the concept of bidirectional communication was fully embraced. While the primary function of the Yam was to transmit imperial directives outwards, it was equally vital for the central government to receive timely and accurate reports from the vast periphery. Local officials, military commanders, and even Yam station masters regularly sent back intelligence on local conditions, potential threats, resource availability, and the general mood of the populace. This continuous influx of information provided the Great Khan and his advisors with a vital understanding of the empire's pulse. A mainstream historical fact: the Mongols were renowned for their intelligence-gathering capabilities, and the Yam system was a fundamental tool in their efforts to collect real-time for the error information from across their vast domain, which informed their strategic decisions. They were the original data analytics team, just with more horses and less Python. Imagine yourself as a station master, dutifully recording the number of horses consumed, the types of messages passing through, and perhaps noting any unusual events or rumors. These local observations, seemingly mundane, would be aggregated and passed up the chain, eventually contributing to the central government's overall picture of the empire. This created a powerful feedback loop. Orders were issued, their effects observed and reported back, and then subsequent orders could be adjusted based on the received intelligence. It was a crude but effective form of iterative governance. You might even find yourself jotting down a mental note about a particularly troublesome stretch of road, knowing that information could be useful. A quirky or fringe tidbit: it said that some Yam riders were specifically tasked with observing conditions along their routes and reporting back on anything noteworthy, even if it wasn't directly related to the message they carried, acting as informal imperial eyes and ears. You were a walking, riding sensor. This bidirectional flow of information was critical for adaptive decision-making. If a military campaign was faltering, the Khan could receive reports and quickly issue new orders. If a region was facing famine, resources could be diverted. This responsiveness, enabled by the Yam's feedback loops, significantly strengthened the Mongol Empire's ability to govern and adapt to rapidly changing circumstances. Historians still argue whether the Mongol administration truly utilized this feedback effectively for long-term strategic planning, or if it was more focused on immediate tactical responses. But the mechanism for feedback was undeniably present and widely used. As you feel the comfort of your bed, you appreciate that the sophisticated feedback loops of the Yam system underscore a timeless truth in logistics and governance. Effective communication is never just one way. It requires a constant flow of information both outwards and inwards, enabling systems to learn, adapt, and ultimately thrive. You're seeing the ancient roots of modern iterative design and agile management, all powered by the relentless motion of ancient data packets. The echoes of those returning messages still whisper across the ages, confirming the power of a two-way street. The soft hum of your room is a comforting backdrop, but in your mind's eye, you still see the human element, the tireless riders, the diligent station masters, the unsung heroes whose dedication made the Yam system a living, breathing reality. While we've focused on the brilliant logistical design, it was the people behind the system, their skills, resilience, and unwavering commitment that truly animated the Mongol postal yurts. These were not just cogs in a machine. They were individuals performing extraordinary feats of endurance and service. The Yam riders, as you experienced, faced immense physical hardship, loneliness, and constant danger. Their dedication to the imperial cause, or perhaps simply to their duty, was paramount. They represented the human face of an otherwise abstract logistical network. You might imagine the pride they felt carrying a Pisa, knowing they were essential to the vast Mongol enterprise. A mainstream historical fact: the Mongol Empire's administration often relied heavily on the loyalty and efficiency of its various civil servants, including those working in the Yam system, highlighting the human capital invested in their complex infrastructure. Their loyalty was literally delivering the empire. The station masters and their families, living in often remote and isolated locations, also played a crucial role. They were responsible for maintaining the stations, managing provisions, tending to horses, and often acting as local representatives of the imperial authority. Their consistency and reliability were just as vital as the speed of the riders. You envision a stern but fair station master, ensuring everything is in order, a small community revolving around the constant arrival and departure of messengers. A quirky or fringe tidbit, some scholars suggest that the role of Yam station master was sometimes passed down through families. creating a hereditary class of logistical experts who possessed deep local knowledge and a vested interest in the system's success. It was like a family business, but with imperial stakes. The effectiveness of the YEM system was a direct reflection of the rigorous training and discipline instilled in its personnel. From horsemanship to navigation, from message handling protocols to basic self-defense, the people who ran the YEM were highly skilled and professional. This human skill set, often passed down through generations, was as much a part of the infrastructure as the yurts and the horses themselves. Historians still argue whether the working conditions for YEM personnel were primarily seen as a privilege due to their importance, or as a grueling, demanding service exacted by the state. But their contribution was undeniably immense. As you drift deeper, you acknowledge the silent, steadfast dedication of these individuals. Without their tireless efforts, the innovative design of the YEM system would have remained just a theoretical concept. It is the human element, the sweat and grit and resolve of countless anonymous individuals that transformed the Mongol postal yurts into one of history's most impressive logistical achievements. You're not just learning about ancient networks, you're connecting with the enduring spirit of human dedication that powers every great endeavor. The echoes of their journeys resonate, reminding us that even the most cutting-edge systems depend on the people who make them work. The final tendrils of sleep wrap around you, but before you fully surrender, let's cast our gaze forward, using the timeless wisdom of the Mongol postal yurts to reflect on the future of logistics. You've journeyed through an ancient world, only to find that its lessons are remarkably relevant to the challenges and innovations unfolding in your own time. The YEM system taught us the enduring importance of a robust backbone infrastructure. Whether it's fiber optic cables, advanced road networks, or even drone delivery corridors, the need for reliable, high-speed routes for information and goods remains paramount. The Mongols perfected the trunk line concept, and future logistics will continue to build upon that fundamental need for efficient arterial flow. You see the drone highways of tomorrow, and you recognize the ghost of an ancient YEM route beneath them. The drive for efficiency and speed, so central to the YEM, will only intensify. In a world of instant gratification and just-in-time delivery, every millisecond counts. The Mongols' relentless pursuit of faster message delivery, even at great human cost, prefigures today's obsession with optimizing every leg of the supply chain. From autonomous vehicles to AI-driven route optimization, the quest for speed, a hallmark of the YEM, remains the holy grail, a mainstream historical fact. Modern supply chain management often utilizes algorithms and data analytics to achieve efficiencies in delivery times that were once unimaginable. A technological leap from the Mongols' manual but highly effective methods. They were the original speed demons of delivery. The adaptability and resilience of the YEM system also offer critical lessons for the future. As global supply chains become more complex and vulnerable to disruptions, be it pandemics, climate events, or geopolitical tensions, the need for redundant routes, decentralized nodes, and flexible responses will be paramount. The Mongols' ability to reroute messages and maintain communication despite challenges is a blueprint for building future-proof logistical networks. You're witnessing the future of disruption-proof delivery, with roots in the ancient steppe. A quirky or fringe tidbit, some futurists are exploring swarm logistics concepts, where networks of small, independent delivery units operate autonomously, but coordinate to achieve larger goals, echoing the decentralized yet unified nature of the YEM station network. So, your future package might be delivered by a flock of tiny, autonomous horse-like drones. Finally, the human element remains vital. Even with advanced automation, the vision, skill, and dedication of people will drive logistical innovation. Just as the YEM riders and station masters were indispensable, so too will be the engineers, data scientists, and strategists who design, implement, and manage the logistical networks of tomorrow. Historians still argue whether technological advancements or fundamental human organizational genius was the greater contributor to the YEM system's success, but it was undoubtedly a powerful synergy. As you finally drift into the deep, quiet comfort of sleep, you carry with you the profound understanding that the ancient dust motes of the Mongol steppe contain the very seeds of tomorrow's interconnected world. The seemingly simple idea of a felt yurt, a horse, and a message forged an empire and taught us lessons that echo through every package delivered to your door. The future of logistics is not just about new technology. It's about timeless principles, refined and reimagined.